Dean Martin made the world feel relaxed. His voice sounded effortless, his smile looked natural, and people believed he lived without worry. But the truth was very different. Behind the jokes and the glass in his hand was a man who carried pain quietly, who learned to stay calm because life had never been easy. This is the story of the charm, the quiet struggle, and the moment when the mask finally slipped. Everyone always believed that Dean Martin's drinking was just part of his act. It was a joke he used to make people laugh, something that helped him appear relaxed and carefree. But on one live television broadcast, that image slipped. When the show began, Dean walked onto the stage slower than usual. His steps were uneven, and he seemed to lean on whatever was close enough to keep his balance. The audience expected him to joke his way through like always, but something felt different. His usual confidence was missing. His smile looked heavy, like it took effort. He tried to start with a light joke, something about only having one drink that night, but the timing was off. The audience gave a small, confused laugh instead of the loud, warm response he usually received. Dean paused, almost like he needed a moment to find his place. He lifted the glass in his hand, but instead of a smooth joke or casual sip, his hand shook slightly. He tried again with another line, but this one fell even flatter. The room became uncomfortable. Viewers at home could feel the silence. People in the studio looked at each other, unsure of what was happening. Behind the cameras, producers began whispering. Some said they should cut to commercial early to give him time to recover backstage. Others were worried that doing that would embarrass him more. Dean had always been known as the man who kept control, who made everything look easy. Cutting away might make the situation look worse. They waited, watching closely. Dean tried to continue. He straightened himself, raised his chin, and tried to put weight back into his voice, but his tone sounded tired and unsteady. The band played softly to help him, hoping music would guide him back. Dean attempted to sing a few lines, but his voice cracked slightly. Not badly, but enough for everyone to hear that something was wrong. The audience did not know whether to clap or stay quiet. A few people gave short claps, hoping to show support, but even that sounded uneasy. Dean looked out at the crowd, but instead of his usual playful, confident expression, there was a distant look, almost like he was somewhere else in his mind. The stage lights seemed too bright on him. The room seemed too silent between his words. He made one more joke, trying to lighten the mood, saying something about how those who don't drink wake up feeling as good as they will feel all day. Normally, that line brought big laughter. That night, it didn't. People just stared, trying to understand if he was joking or speaking honestly. The charm that he used to feel effortless now looked like something he was struggling to hold on to. The producers made one final decision not to cut away, hoping he would settle into the moment the way he always had in the past. But instead of recovering, Dean slowly lowered his gaze. His face softened, and the mask he had worn for years was gone, even if only for a second. He looked like a man carrying something heavy that no one else could see. It was the first time many realized that the act they had laughed at for years had roots in something real. But to understand why this moment mattered, we have to go all the way back to where Dean Martin began. Dean Martin was not born into comfort. Long before the fame, the smooth voice, and the relaxed confidence, there was a childhood marked by struggle. He was born as Dino Paul Crosetti on the 7th of June, 1917, in Steubenville, Ohio. His parents had come from Italy, hoping to build a better life, but what they found was hard work and very little money. His father cut hair in a small barber shop, working long hours for low pay. His mother cleaned houses and took in laundry from neighbors. They earned just enough to keep the family going, but never enough to feel secure. The family lived in a small two-room apartment above a shoemaker's shop. There was no running water inside their home, and they did not have their own bathroom. Instead, they shared an outdoor toilet in the backyard with several other families. Winters were especially difficult. The wind would slip through cracks in the walls, and the water they carried into the house would freeze overnight. Meals were simple and repeated often. Bread, pasta, and vegetables from a small backyard garden were the main foods they could afford. Meat was rare and saved for special occasions. At home, the family spoke Italian. Dino did not speak a word of English until he was 5 years old. When he started school, he quickly realized that not understanding the language made him different. Other children teased him for the way he spoke. They laughed at his accent, his clothes, and the lunches his mother packed. Some days he avoided talking as much as possible just so he would not be mocked. His older brother sometimes went to school with him to help translate, but even then, Dino could feel that he was seen as an outsider. School did not become easier with time. The more he understood English, the more he noticed the gap between what his classmates had and what his family could not afford. Some children came to school in clean, new clothes. Dino's shirts were often worn, mended, or handed down. Other kids talked about toys, vacations, and birthday parties. Dino had none of those things. This early awareness of class difference stayed with him. He learned not to complain. He learned to keep his feelings inside. He learned how to smile even when he felt small. These habits later shaped the personality the world came to admire: calm, unbothered, and always seemingly in control. As he grew older, Dino found it harder to care about schoolwork. He did not see how sitting in a classroom was going to help his family pay rent or buy food. The pressure of knowing his parents were exhausted from work affected him. He felt he needed to contribute. By the time he reached his early teens, he had made up his mind. At 13, he left school and went looking for real work. It was not an easy decision, but he believed it was necessary. Leaving school meant stepping directly into the world of adults. He learned to work hard and stay quiet. He learned that life was not going to give him opportunities, he would have to chase them himself. The hunger he experienced as a child was not only physical, it was also emotional and personal. He wanted a life where he did not feel less than others. He wanted dignity. He wanted to be respected. And most of all, he wanted to never feel powerless again. The world told him he didn't belong, and Dean decided he'd prove it wrong. When Dean left school at 13, it wasn't because he disliked learning. It was because his family needed money, and he felt responsible. He understood early that survival came before dreams. There was no time to think about what he wanted to be in the future. The future, for him, was simply the next day, and whether his family could get through it. So he went looking for whatever work he could find, no matter how small the pay or how difficult the job. One of his first jobs was delivering bootleg whiskey across the Ohio River. It was the time of Prohibition, when alcohol was illegal in many places. Even as a teenager, he carried hidden bottles at night, knowing that if he was caught, he could be arrested. He earned only a few cents each run, but every coin was needed. The work taught him to stay calm in dangerous situations, to keep his face relaxed even when his heart was racing. This ability to stay cool under pressure became one of the most recognizable parts of his 22 personality later in life. After that, he began running numbers for local bookmakers. Gambling was common among steel mill workers who spent their hard-earned pay hoping to win more. Dino would collect bets, pass messages, and deliver winnings or losses. The men he dealt with were not gentle. They were rough, direct, and sometimes angry when luck fell against them. Dino learned how to talk to them without provoking conflict. He listened more than he spoke. He understood that in some situations, silence was safer than words. He also shined shoes at the country club and cleaned up after events. He stocked shelves at small shops and carried heavy crates at warehouses. Each job taught him something different: how to observe people, how to read moods, how to stay polite, even when tired. By early morning, he delivered newspapers, walking in the cold before most of the town was awake. By afternoon, he took whatever extra work he could find. There was never a moment when he was not working or trying to find work. At 15, he lied about his age to work night shifts in the steel mill. The mill was loud, hot, and dangerous. The long hours left workers exhausted. The pay was still low, but higher than anything he had earned before. Some nights, he came home so tired that he fell asleep before he could eat. His hands were rough and cut from handling metal. But he kept going because quitting was not an option. During these years, Dean learned how men carried themselves in harsh environments. He saw how some shouted to show strength, while others showed their power by staying quiet and unbothered. He noticed that the men who never worked too hard to impress others were the ones people respected most. He began shaping his own behavior around this idea. He moved slowly, spoke softly, smiled instead of arguing. It wasn't confidence at first. It was self-protection. But over time, it became natural. People began seeing him as calm and in control, even when he didn't feel that way inside. He also learned how to drink in these circles. Drinking wasn't about celebration. It was about fitting in. It was part of how men bonded, how they shared their struggles without speaking directly about them. Dean watched how alcohol affected them, the jokes, the loud stories, the sudden sadness. These observations later helped him create the drunk act he became famous for. It wasn't random humor. It was something he had studied for years. Life on the Ohio streets taught Dean how to blend into any room. He could stand with factory workers, gamblers, or wealthy club members and feel like he belonged. He carried himself like someone who did not need to prove anything. That attitude would become one of the reasons audiences loved him later in life. It made him seem relaxed and confident, even when things were difficult. But there was one job that nearly ended everything before his career ever began. When Dean was around 15, he found a new way to make money, and it was a dangerous one. He started boxing in small, underground rings around the Ohio Valley. These were not official matches with rules and safety. They were fights held in basements, storage rooms, and back rooms of bars. People would gather to bet on who would last the longest. To them, it was entertainment. For Dean, it was work. He fought under the name Kid Crochet, taken from his last name, Crocetti. It sounded tough, and toughness mattered in those rooms. The fights were rough. There was no professional training, no proper protective gear, and often not even proper gloves. Many nights, Dean fought bare-knuckled because he could not afford wraps. His bones and skin took the damage directly. Every match was a test of how long he could stay on his feet. Winning meant money. Losing meant going home bruised and in pain. But he kept fighting because it paid more than most other jobs he could get at his age. Over time, the fights left marks on his body that stayed forever. One punch broke his nose badly and made it sit slightly crooked. His knuckles cracked and healed incorrectly, leaving them swollen and uneven. During one especially hard fight, a hook split his lip deep, leaving a scar that never disappeared. The small unevenness in his smile, which many later thought looked charming and relaxed, came from that injury. People would one day call his smile effortless, but it had come from pain, not ease. Dean's record in the ring was better than many expected. He won more fights than he lost, and in those circles, that gave him a small amount of respect. He could take hits without showing fear. He learned how to appear calm even when every part of his body hurt. This skill later became part of the personality he was famous for. He looked like someone who never allowed anything to bother him, as if life was always easy. But the truth was that he had simply learned to hide pain. The turning point came in 1936, during one of his matches at the Steubenville Memorial Auditorium. His opponent landed a hard blow to the side of his head, a rabbit punch, which is a hit to a vulnerable spot behind the ear. Dean collapsed immediately. He did not get up. The room went silent. People leaned over the ropes trying to see if he was breathing. He wasn't. It took several minutes for anyone to revive him. When he finally opened his eyes, he couldn't remember who he was or where he was. He threw up repeatedly and had trouble standing. He was taken to the hospital, where doctors told him he had suffered a serious concussion. The doctor warned him that one more hit like that could kill him. He spent 3 days under observation, dizzy and weak. His speech was slow, and his memory came back bit by bit. When the bill came, it was $470, which was far more than his family could ever afford. They had to borrow and plead for help. That cost alone made it clear that continuing to fight was not only dangerous, it could leave the family in debt they might never escape. The close call forced Dean to think about what he was doing with his life. He realized that if he continued fighting, he might not live long. Even if he survived, he could end up too injured to work. The risk was too high. The doctor's warning stayed in his mind. He decided he needed to walk away from boxing. It was not a heroic decision, just a necessary one. But it changed everything. Even during the boxing years, Dean had sometimes sung at small gatherings or clubs. People noticed his voice, smooth and warm, different from the rough world he lived in. At first, singing was just something he did between other jobs. But now, with boxing no longer an option, he needed something else. He needed a way to make money that would not destroy his body. Singing began to look like a real chance, even if he didn't yet know where it could lead. If boxing almost destroyed him, singing was about to save him. After leaving boxing behind, Dean needed something else to support. He had already tried many kinds of work, but none of them offered a future. Around this time, he began to use his voice more seriously. He had always liked singing, even as a child. His mother sang Italian songs while working, and he had grown up listening to records when the family could afford them. So he started singing in small local clubs and bars. These places were not glamorous. Some were smoky rooms with only a handful of people sitting at tables. Others were loud and crowded, where people barely paid attention to the music. But it was a start, and he needed the money. When Dean first began performing, he did not have a style of his own. He tried copying other singers he admired. He especially listened to Harry Mills from the Mills Brothers. Harry had a smooth, warm voice that made songs sound gentle and easy. Dean noticed that the power in that voice did not come from forcing anything. It came from relaxation, from sounding unbothered. This idea would become very important for him. In a world where most men showed strength by speaking loudly or acting tough, being calm was a different kind of strength. Dean studied this carefully. His early gigs were inconsistent. Some places liked him and invited him back. Others said he needed more experience. There were nights when no one listened to him. There were nights when people shouted over him, and he had to pretend not to care. He was not famous, and he did not earn much. But gradually, he improved. He learned how to control his breathing. He learned how to keep his voice smooth instead of pushing it. And most importantly, he learned how to make people feel comfortable when he sang, as if the room itself became softer. During this period, Dean also worked at the Rex cigar store, which was not just a store. It was actually a front for an illegal gambling operation run by a local crime family. In the back room, there were card games, roulette wheels, and men who did not tolerate mistakes. Dean worked as a croupier, handling money and managing bets. The job was risky, but it paid more than most legal jobs he could find. To keep that job, he had to learn a different kind of stage presence. He could not show fear, even when situations became tense. He could not speak too much or too little. He needed to appear calm and in control, no matter what was happening around him. This environment became another form of training. It taught him how to read a room quickly. He learned to watch faces, movements, and small changes in tone. He could sense when someone was frustrated, when someone was hiding anger, and when someone was relaxed. These skills later helped him connect with audiences without seeming like he was trying. On stage, he always looked natural, as if he had just walked in and started talking. People believed he was relaxed because he seemed relaxed, but that was something he had practiced for years. He continued to perform wherever he could. Sometimes he sang while dealing cards or during quiet moments when gamblers were taking a break. Other times he performed at small dances or hotel lounges. Slowly, he became known in his local area as someone who had a good voice and a comfortable style. But success still felt far away. He was just one of many singers trying to make it through. Even with the challenges, Dean kept going because singing gave him something that boxing and factory work never did. It gave him a sense of identity that did not rely on toughness or silence. When he sang, he felt like himself. He did not have to pretend. He didn't have to fight. His voice allowed him to communicate gently, even with people who were rough or angry. It made him feel steady. Then came one decision that would rewrite his identity forever. When Dean was still performing under his birth name, Dino Crocetti, he started getting more regular work singing with small dance bands. One of the band leaders he worked with was Sammy Watkins, a well-known figure in the Cleveland music scene. Sammy liked Dino's voice and saw potential in him, but he also believed that his name was holding him back. At the time, having an ethnic, clearly Italian name made it harder to appeal to a wider American audience. Sammy told him that if he wanted to become a national performer, he needed a stage name that sounded easier and more familiar. After some thought, they chose the name Dean Martin. It was simple, clean, and fit the style he was developing. That name change marked the beginning of a new identity. He wasn't just a young man from a struggling immigrant family anymore. He was someone who could stand in front of crowds and hold their attention. With his new name, Dean started traveling more. He performed in ballrooms, hotel lounges, and nightclubs across the Midwest. Every performance helped him build confidence. At first, he sometimes doubted himself, wondering if he truly belonged on stage. But the more he sang, the more he realized that people responded to the natural, relaxed way he delivered a song. He didn't push his voice or try to show off. He let the song come through smoothly, as if he were just speaking with rhythm. Audiences liked how comfortable he made them feel. His calm, slow tone created a warm atmosphere, even in noisy clubs. He didn't rely on dramatic gestures or big movements. His power came from ease, and that set him apart. During this time, Dean also married his first wife, Betty McDonald. They started a family, and over the next few years, they had 4 children together. While Dean was becoming more successful, his home life became busier and more demanding. Being a father brought him joy, but it also came with difficulty. His work required constant traveling. He was performing in different cities every week, sometimes every night. He missed birthdays, holidays, and ordinary daily moments that most families shared. Betty spent most of her time raising the children alone, and the distance between them grew. Dean cared about his family, but he also felt pressure to continue working. He had spent his childhood watching his parents struggle for money, and he did not want that for his own children. To him, working meant security, even if it meant being away. As the years passed, Dean's reputation continued to grow. His voice became known for its smooth, relaxed tone, and his appearance added to the impression of effortless charm. He wore suits comfortably and carried himself with a quiet confidence. People liked watching him because he didn't look like he was trying hard to impress anyone. He always seemed like he was simply being himself. But this appearance of ease was something he had learned through years of hardship, observation, and performance. It was not an act, but a skill. Even though he was finding success, his career had not yet reached the level that would make him a household name. He was respected, but he was not yet famous. That moment would come soon, but it required one more connection, one more stroke of luck, and one more turn in his path. Without knowing it, Dean was standing just one step away from the partnership that would change not only his life, but the direction of American entertainment. But his career wasn't just about to rise, it was about to explode. When Dean Martin met Jerry Lewis in 1946, neither of them expected anything special to happen. They were both working performers, each trying to make a living in nightclubs and theaters. Dean was the smooth singer, with a quiet, relaxed presence. Jerry was the loud, energetic comedian who could turn anything into a joke. At first, they were simply scheduled to perform on the same show at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. Another act canceled, and the club owner told them to go on stage together to fill the time. There was no script, no plan, and no rehearsal. They just walked out and began to play off each other. That night changed their lives. Jerry started acting wild, jumping around, making faces, and interrupting Dean's singing. Dean responded with calm jokes and gentle teasing. The contrast between the two created a natural rhythm that felt effortless. The crowd loved it. People laughed so hard that they could barely catch their breath. The owner of the club asked them to return the next night and do the same thing. They did, and it worked again. Soon, word spread that something new and exciting was happening with these two performers. In a short time, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis became known as a duo. Their partnership grew quickly. They started performing in larger venues, and people lined up to see them. The act was mostly improvised, which made every show feel alive. Jerry acted like a playful child, while Dean stayed relaxed and steady. The more chaotic Jerry became, the more calm Dean appeared. Together, they created a balance that felt natural and funny. Audiences enjoyed seeing how Dean reacted to Jerry's unpredictable behavior. Dean's gentle eye rolls and patient smiles became just as funny as Jerry's loud jokes. Nightclubs were only the beginning. Soon, radio hosts invited them on air, and television networks took interest. Their popularity exploded. Their appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show and other programs made them nationally recognized. People loved watching the two of them together, and their chemistry looked effortless. In addition to stage and TV performances, Hollywood also came calling. Film studios saw that their act had big potential. They were signed to make movies, and their first film together, My Friend Irma, became a major hit. In Las Vegas, their fame grew even more. The city was heavily influenced by organized crime at the time, and many nightclubs and casinos were controlled by mob figures. Martin and Lewis performed in these places often. Their shows drew huge crowds, filled with both ordinary fans and important figures. They worked late nights, did long tours, and made a lot of money. Their names became famous across the country. They performed in theaters that were packed every night. People stood outside just hoping to get a glimpse of them. However, as their success grew, their roles began to feel uneven. Jerry Lewis became known as the energetic star, the one who grabbed people's attention first. Dean, being quieter, was sometimes described as the straight man, meaning the calm partner who gave Jerry space to be funny. Even though Dean's presence was just as important to the act, many people thought Jerry was the main attraction. Over time, this affected their friendship. Jerry began to have more creative control over their movies and shows, and he often wanted to take the spotlight. Dean started to feel like he was being treated as less important, even though the act could not work without him. He had worked hard for years to find his own identity and voice, and now he felt like it was being overshadowed. Jerry was younger and more eager to push boundaries, while Dean wanted steadiness and respect. These differences slowly created tension between them. The stress finally came to a breaking point during a show in Las Vegas. Jerry made a joke on stage that suggested Dean only stood next to him to look good. Dean laughed it off in front of the crowd. But backstage, the mood changed. The two argued, and Jerry, in frustration, hit Dean in the mouth. The punch required stitches. Even though they performed again the next night, something between them had changed permanently. Their partnership officially ended in 1956. After 10 years of working together nearly every day, they stopped speaking to each other. The breakup was public, and many people were shocked. Magazines and newspapers reported on it for weeks. Fans were disappointed, and Hollywood wondered what would happen next. Studios and producers believed Jerry Lewis would continue to rise on his own. He was younger, energetic, and widely recognized. Many thought Dean Martin would fade away, remembered only as the calm partner who stood next to Jerry. The end of the partnership also caused emotional pain. They had once been very close, almost like brothers. They shared success, traveled together, and spent more time with each other than with their families. Now, that connection was gone. For years, they did not talk at all. Their final film, together, Hollywood or Bust, was released after their separation. They promoted it separately and did not appear together again for a long time. The movie was successful, but it marked the end of an era. The duo that had once brought joy to so many people was no more. Everyone thought Jerry would soar and Dean would fade, but they were wrong. When the partnership with Jerry Lewis ended, most people believed Dean's career would slow down. Jerry was seen as the loud, funny one, the one who drove the act. But Dean had something people hadn't fully seen yet. He had a voice that could stand on its own. And now, for the first time, he was free to use it without being overshadowed. Instead of fading away, he decided to focus on recording music. In 1955, he recorded a song called "Memories Are Made of This." It had a warm, gentle rhythm and a simple melody that matched his relaxed style perfectly. When the song was released, it became a hit. It reached #1 on the charts and stayed there for weeks. It sold millions of copies around the world. Suddenly, Dean Martin wasn't just a comedian's partner. He was a star in his own right. After that, he released more songs that showed his voice was special. He recorded "Sway," a song with a soft Latin beat. The way he sang it made it sound smooth and natural, as if he had just stepped into the room and started singing without effort. Then came "Innamorata," which became another well-known track. These songs helped shape what would become Dean's signature vocal style. His voice was never loud or intense. It didn't force emotion. Instead, it invited people to relax and listen. Dean sang like someone who was calm in every situation. People admired that quality, especially in a world that often felt stressful and fast. During this time, Dean also became a major headliner in Las Vegas. Vegas was becoming a center of entertainment, attracting performers from all over the country. Dean fit perfectly into this environment. His calm confidence made him stand out on stage, even when the room was loud and crowded. Crowds loved him because watching him felt easy. There was no pressure, no pretension. He made audiences feel comfortable and welcomed. He sang, told small jokes, and chatted casually with the people watching. It looked effortless, and because of that, it felt genuine. Vegas also brought him closer to Frank Sinatra. Frank was already seen as one of the biggest entertainers in America. He respected Dean's talent and liked his relaxed personality. The two became close friends. Soon, Dean became part of the Rat Pack, a famous group of performers that included Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. They performed together in shows that felt more like friendly gatherings than formal concerts. On stage, they teased each other, laughed, and improvised. Audiences loved the energy between them. The Rat Pack symbolized a style that was smooth, confident, and humorous. Dean fit in naturally. He didn't try to stand out, he simply was himself, and that was enough. Being part of the Rat Pack helped Dean's public image grow even stronger. He became known as the man who never seemed to worry. His easy-does-it style became his signature. People believed he lived without stress or struggle. They saw him drinking and making jokes on stage, and assumed everything came naturally to him. But those who knew him understood that the calm attitude had come from years of hardship. It wasn't something he was born with. It was something he learned to carry. His presence was strong in films as well. Dean acted in several movies that allowed him to play roles close to his natural personality. In films like Rio Bravo and Ocean's 11, he didn't have to pretend to be someone completely different. He used his natural charm and subtle humor to bring characters to life. He didn't force emotion, and audiences connected with that. He gave people the sense that life didn't need to be rushed. His performances reminded them to take things slowly, to breathe, and to be at ease. As the years passed, Dean continued recording, performing, and acting. He became one of the highest-paid entertainers of his time. He had gone from being the quiet partner behind Jerry Lewis to being a respected and admired star across the country. Yet, even as he achieved success, there were parts of his career that he didn't completely enjoy. One example was the song That's Amore. The song was catchy, light, and fun. It became one of his most recognizable hits. People loved it, and they expected him to sing it in almost every performance. The song brought him wealth and fame, but he personally did not like it. He felt that it made him look like a caricature of an Italian stereotype. It didn't reflect the depth or subtlety he wanted to show as a singer. But the song was popular, and success sometimes means doing what people ask for, not just what you prefer. Dean continued singing it because it was part of what the audience wanted. Even though he didn't enjoy performing the song, he understood its role in his career. It was the piece of music that almost everyone recognized. It had built his name into something larger, but every time he sang it, he remembered that popularity could also limit a person. Fame gives, but it also takes. But the signature song that made him rich also trapped him. That's Amore was one of Dean Martin's most famous songs, but it was also the song he personally disliked the most. When people heard it, they smiled, laughed, and felt joyful. The melody was catchy, and the lyrics painted a playful picture of romance and Italy. For many listeners, it felt warm and fun. But to Dean, the song felt exaggerated. He felt it turned him into a stereotype, like a cartoon version of an Italian man rather than a real person. The line, "When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie," sounded silly to him. It did not match the image of himself he wanted to present as a serious singer. Dean had spent years finding his own voice, shaping a style that was calm, smooth, and natural. He wanted to share music that felt honest, but That's Amore made him feel like he was acting out a part instead of expressing himself. It didn't match the quiet strength he had worked so hard to develop. Even though the song was light-hearted and audiences loved it, Dean felt uncomfortable with how it defined him. Some people only saw him as the cheerful, joking singer of that one song. That frustrated him because he knew he had more depth and range as an artist. Despite his feelings, he kept singing That's Amore for many years. There were practical reasons for this. The song was a major hit. It helped make him famous, and it brought in a lot of money. Audiences expected to hear it at his shows. When he tried to skip it, people complained or felt disappointed. He understood that part of being a professional entertainer was giving the audience what they wanted. So even though the song embarrassed him, he performed it repeatedly. Performing a song you don't like can create a quiet, internal conflict. Every time he sang the lyrics, he had to push past his discomfort and pretend to enjoy it. He would smile and look relaxed, even though inside he felt tired of the act. This was a pattern in his life, maintaining a calm, easy image no matter what he felt privately. That image helped him succeed, but it also made it harder for people to truly understand him. They believed he was always carefree. They believed he never took anything seriously. In reality, he was making careful choices, balancing what he wanted with what the world demanded from him. Over time, people began to forget that Dean had released songs with emotional depth and technical skill. That's Amore became the one song many associated with him. While it brought him fame, it also limited how people saw him. It was a trade-off. Popularity at the cost of being misunderstood. Still, Dean continued moving forward in his career. He recorded new music, performed in more shows, and acted in movies. He didn't let the frustration stop him. He knew that success in entertainment was complicated. Sometimes you have to accept something you don't love to maintain what you have worked for. But even with the limitations the song placed on him, his career was far from finished. He still had important moments ahead of him, including a moment so surprising that it shocked the entire music industry. Then came the one moment he shocked the world and beat the Beatles. In 1964, the Beatles were the biggest force in music. Their songs were at the top of the charts week after week, and many people believed no one could compete with them. They represented a new era, and young listeners were especially drawn to their energy and style. But that year, Dean Martin released a song that quietly changed the conversation. The song was "Everybody Loves Somebody." It had a gentle tempo and a smooth melody, and Dean sang it in his familiar, relaxed way. It wasn't loud, dramatic, or trendy. It was simple, warm, and sincere. When the song was released, no one expected it to make a strong impact. Even people in the music industry thought it would do well with older listeners, but wouldn't come close to touching the popularity of the Beatles. But slowly, the song began to rise on the charts. It kept climbing, week by week, until something unexpected happened. "Everybody Loves Somebody" reached #1. And it didn't just reach #1 on a small chart. It replaced the Beatles' hit "A Hard Day's Night" at the top of the Billboard Hot 100. This was a surprising moment for the music world. It showed that Dean Martin still had strong influence, and that his style had not been replaced by the new wave of pop music. His calm approach, his gentle tone, and his confident ease still connected with people. Listeners of all ages found something comforting in his voice. The wind showed that music did not always need to be new or youthful to have meaning. Sometimes, familiarity and warmth were just as powerful. For Dean, this victory meant more than just another successful song. It was a personal statement. It reminded the world that he was not just the former partner of Jerry Lewis, not just a singer known for one humorous song, and not just a casual member of the Rat Pack. He was an artist who could still make a strong impact on his own. The success of "Everybody Loves Somebody" also reshaped his career. It became one of his signature songs, and he performed it in concerts and television appearances for many years. The moment also carried emotional meaning. The song had been arranged by Ken Lane, who was not only his pianist but also his close friend. The success felt shared and genuine, not just commercial. Dean didn't brag or make bold statements about beating the Beatles. When asked about it, he joked that the Beatles must have just taken a short break. That was his way: quiet, light, and calm. But his career was not only defined by music. He also continued to act in movies, and his roles showed different sides of him. The films allowed him to use more emotional expression and explore characters with depth. But the movies would reveal a Dean no one expected. When people think of Dean Martin, many remember the relaxed singer on stage, smiling, joking, and appearing completely at ease. But his film career showed a different side of him, one that carried more depth than most expected. Acting gave him a chance to express feelings he didn't always show in public. Some of his most meaningful roles were the ones where he stopped pretending that everything was easy. One of the first films that truly demonstrated this was Rio Bravo in 1959. In this movie, Dean played a character named Dude, a former deputy who had fallen into alcoholism. The role required him to show weakness, struggle, and pain. It was very different from the smooth entertainer people saw on stage. He had to act out shaking hands, tired eyes, and the slow fight to regain self-respect. Many who watched the film were surprised. They realized that Dean could do more than smile and sing. He could show the emotional cost of life's hardships. Some of the emotion in his performance came from his own experiences. He understood what it meant to hide pain behind a calm face. Critics praised the film, and many people began to see him in a new light. In 1960, he appeared in Ocean's 11 alongside Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and others in the Rat Pack. The film was stylish and fun, capturing the look and feel of Las Vegas at that time. Dean didn't have to stretch as much emotionally in this movie, but it showed how natural he was in front of the camera. He didn't push things. He didn't overact. He simply let the character flow from his real personality. Many actors tried to force charm, but Dean didn't have to. His calm voice, steady movements, and easy manner made his performances feel real. Later, in the 1960 Seconds, he took on a completely different kind of role in the Matt Helm spy films. These movies were playful parodies of the James Bond style. Dean played a secret agent who handled danger casually and with humor. The films had action scenes, jokes, and glamorous sets. They were not meant to be taken seriously, and audiences enjoyed them for their entertainment value. Dean seemed to have fun with these roles. He didn't pretend to be a serious action hero. He knew the character was light and humorous, and he played it that way. The Matt Helm films were commercially successful and helped keep him visible to newer audiences. However, something tragic happened during the filming of the fourth Matt Helm movie, The Wrecking Crew, released in 1968. One of the actresses in the film was Sharon Tate, a young and talented star who was admired by many. Bruce Lee trained her personally for her fight scenes in the movie. She was full of life and had a bright future. But a few months after the film was completed, she was murdered by the Manson family. The news shocked the entire country. For Dean, it was deeply painful. Sharon was not just a co-worker. She was someone he spoke to, laughed with, and worked closely beside. Her death made the movie feel connected to something dark and painful. There was supposed to be a fifth Matt Helm movie. Plans were already discussed, and the studio expected Dean to return. But after Sharon's death, he refused. He did not want to return to the franchise. The movie role no longer felt like simple entertainment. It reminded him of tragedy. The studio tried to convince him, even putting pressure on him through contract terms. But Dean remained firm. He chose to step away, even though it meant losing money. This showed something important about his character. He did not do things just because they were profitable. When something felt wrong, he walked away, even if others disagreed. In 1970, Dean appeared in Airport, a large ensemble drama that became a major commercial success. The film was serious and tense, with emotional moments and conflicts between characters. Dean played a pilot who had to handle a difficult situation under pressure. His performance was steady and believable. The movie became one of the highest-earning films of the year, and it showed that Dean could still carry strong roles, even as new Hollywood trends were changing the industry. Throughout his film career, Dean kept a natural acting style. He didn't try to impress the audience with big emotional displays. He didn't shout or overact. He used small expressions, quiet pauses, and simple movements. This made his performances feel real. People believed him because he did not force anything. His style was similar to his singing. It was slow, steady, and honest. By this point, Dean had experienced success in music, comedy, live performance, and movies. He had reinvented himself more than once. People respected him because he continued to grow and adapt. Yet, even with all of these achievements, a heavy sadness waited ahead. Something was coming that would change his life in a way no one could prepare for. But nothing would break him like what happened next. Dean's life had included many difficult chapters. He had grown up with almost nothing, worked dangerous jobs, survived beatings in the boxing ring, handled fame, pressure, and public attention. He had lived through scandals, business troubles, and breakups. But all of these challenges were small compared to what he faced in 1987. This time, the pain was not something he could hide behind a smile or a joke. It involved his son, Dean Paul Martin, known to most as Dino Jr. Dino Jr. was born in 1951. From a young age, he showed talent in many areas. He acted in movies, played music, and even became part of a short-lived pop group in his teens. But unlike his father, fame was not what he stayed with. As he grew older, he looked for something meaningful to devote his life to. He found that meaning in flying. He joined the United States Air Force and worked hard to become a skilled pilot. He trained with discipline and patience, earning respect from the people he worked with. Later, he joined the California Air National Guard, flying F-4 Phantom fighter jets. These aircraft were powerful and difficult to handle, and only well-trained pilots were trusted with them. Dino took his job seriously. He was known for being calm, focused, and committed. Dean was proud of his son, not because he was famous, but because he had built his own path. Dino had not relied on his father's name. He had not tried to follow in the shadow of the Rat Pack or Hollywood. He had chosen a life of discipline and service. For Dean, this meant more than any award or public recognition. It showed strength of character, something Dean valued deeply. On the 21st of March 1987, Dino took off from March Air Force Base in California with his weapons officer, Captain Ramon Ortiz. The weather was not ideal. A snowstorm was developing in the mountains. The visibility was low, and the flight conditions were difficult. While they were flying over the San Bernardino Mountains, their F-4 Phantom jet disappeared from radar. There was no distress call, no chance to react. The jet hit the side of Mount San Gorgonio at a high speed. Both men were killed instantly. At first, there was confusion. The Air Guard conducted search efforts, but the mountain was covered in deep snow. It took days to locate the wreckage. During that time, Dean waited for news, hoping but also fearing the worst. When the crash site was finally found, the confirmation came. His son was gone. This loss changed Dean deeply. He had always been strong in the face of difficulties. He had always been able to keep his emotions controlled. But the death of his son broke something inside him. The happy, joking personality he had shown in public was no longer something he could even pretend to maintain. He began to drink heavily, not as part of an act, but to numb himself. This time, the glass he held was not filled with apple juice. It was real alcohol, and it was not for entertainment. It was to quiet pain. Dean stopped performing as much. He canceled shows. He avoided public events. Friends noticed that he became withdrawn. He didn't want to talk about his feelings, and he didn't want to be comforted. He spent more time alone and lost interest in work. Even music, which had once brought him peace, now felt empty. The energy and presence he once had on stage were no longer there. In 1988, Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. invited Dean to join them on a concert tour that was meant to celebrate their long careers and friendship. They hoped the tour might help Dean recover, or at least feel connected to something familiar. The tour was advertised widely, and many people were excited to see the three of them together again. But Dean only lasted for a few shows. The travel, the bright lights, the cheers, and the effort of performing were too heavy for him. His sadness made everything feel distant. After a short time, he left the tour. Liza Minnelli stepped in to replace him, and the tour continued without him. People said it was due to health problems, but those close to him knew the real reason. Despite how many people cared about him, Dean did not want help. His friends tried to encourage him to get treatment or at least slow down on drinking, but he refused. He did not want to discuss his grief. He kept everything inside, just as he had learned to do when he was young. The difference was that this pain was too deep to ignore. His family also tried to support him. His children visited him and spent time with him, but he remained distant. He did not show anger or frustration. He simply seemed tired. He had spent his whole life building a relaxed, effortless image, and now he no longer had the strength to maintain it. The weight of losing his son stayed with him every day, and when his friends tried to save him, he wouldn't let them. In the years after his son's death, Dean slowly removed himself from the world that had once surrounded him. He had spent decades on stage, in front of cameras, in crowds, and in the center of attention. But now, he preferred to be alone. He no longer felt connected to the image that the public expected from him. The relaxed smile, the jokes, and the playful glass of whiskey were no longer something he could perform. He had carried that act for most of his life, and after losing Dino Jr., he didn't have the strength to continue it. Friends noticed that he stopped going out for dinners and gatherings. He no longer hosted or visited. He kept his home quiet and limited his social contact. Even when he did spend time with others, he spoke less and seemed distant. He didn't complain, and he didn't talk about his feelings. When someone tried to bring up his grief, he changed the subject or ended the conversation. He believed that talking about pain did not make it easier. He chose silence instead. Doctors eventually discovered that he had health problems related to decades of smoking. He had developed lung issues, and later he was diagnosed with lung cancer. His doctors suggested treatments that could help, including surgery and therapy. His family encouraged him to try. His friends asked him to fight, but Dean refused. He did not. He wanted to spend his final years in hospitals or dealing with medical procedures. He had lived most of his life on his own terms, and he wanted to end it the same way. He said that he was tired and that he simply wanted peace. During these years, he stayed mostly inside his Beverly Hills home. He watched television, listened to music, and sometimes visited his favorite restaurants quietly. He did not seek attention. He didn't talk about his past or his career. He let time move slowly. People who visited said that he remained polite and gentle. He did not show anger. He did not show bitterness. He just seemed to be waiting. On the 25th of December, 1995 Christmas morning, Dean Martin passed away in his sleep at the age of 78. The cause was acute respiratory failure. His death was quiet, without public spectacle. It matched the quiet life he had chosen in his final years. When the news spread, many people were shocked. For so long, he had seemed like someone who would always be there, unchanged. The Las Vegas Strip dimmed its lights to honor him. Many entertainers spoke about his kindness and his ability to make others feel at ease. Frank Sinatra called him a brother. After his death, more details about his personal life became known. People learned that he had invested carefully in real estate over the years. He owned properties in Las Vegas and Los Angeles that had increased greatly in value. He had purchased some land in the 1,960 seconds for relatively small amounts. And by the 1,990 seconds, those properties were worth millions. His estate was estimated to be around $30 million. This surprised many, because Dean had always acted as if he didn't worry about money. In truth, he had quietly planned for the future, not just for himself, but for his family. Another truth also came out again, something people had heard rumors about but were never sure of. Jerry Lewis confirmed that during the height of their careers, Dean's on-stage drinking was mostly an act. The glass he carried often held apple juice, not alcohol. The slurred words and slow movements were performed intentionally. Dean had created a character who looked carefree and slightly drunk because it made audiences feel relaxed. He understood that humor often works best when it looks casual and unplanned. He knew exactly what he was doing. His coolness was not luck, it was skill. However, after his son's death, the act disappeared. That was when he drank for real. That was when the mask fell. For most of his life, the world saw a clown with a whiskey glass. They saw someone who appeared to joke through life without effort. But the truth was sharper. He carried pain quietly, handled pressure calmly, and chose peace whenever possible. His public image was simple, but his inner life was not. So, who was Dean Martin really? Dean Martin's story shows that a person can seem relaxed on the outside while carrying more weight than people will ever know. The ease he showed in his voice, his accent, jokes, and his smile was not something he was born with. It was something he learned and trained himself to use. From his childhood in a poor immigrant household to the dangerous work he took on in his teens, he discovered early that staying calm could protect him. Speaking softly, moving slowly, and looking unbothered became a shield. While others raised their voices and showed their anger, Dean stayed quiet. People respected that, but they also misunderstood it. They thought it meant he didn't feel anything deeply. In reality, the ease was armor. Throughout his career, the public saw a man who appeared to float through life. They saw someone who joked easily, sang gently, and never looked stressed. Many admired him for looking effortless, but that same ease prevented others from seeing the real him. It became difficult for people to understand that he struggled like anyone else. Audiences enjoyed the performance and expected it every time. They did not see the pressure that came with maintaining it. Dean knew that his calm presence made others feel comfortable. It helped him build a successful career, but it also created distance. When people love the mask you wear more than the person underneath, it becomes hard to show your true feelings. If he was sad, many assumed he was joking. If he was hurt, many thought he was simply being dramatic. When he tried to pull back, people wanted him to return to the version of himself they recognized. The public rarely sees the quiet cost of expectation. His humor and his drinking act were also parts of this mask. People laughed with him when he held a glass on stage and appeared tipsy. They thought they were seeing the real Dean. But for most of his life, the glass held apple juice. The act was designed to entertain, not to reveal. He understood how to make people feel relaxed by playing a man who didn't take life seriously. In truth, he took life very seriously. The performance was not for himself, it was for everyone else. When his son died, the mask could no longer hold the pain. The ease that once protected him no longer worked. The quiet smile fell away, and the relaxed image faded. For the first time, the distance between who he was and who the world believed him to be became too great to manage. The public saw him less and less because he no longer had the strength to continue the act. The things that had once helped him survive became impossible to maintain. Dean Martin's life shows how complicated it is to be admired for something that is only partly true. Being loved for the mask can feel like being unseen. The world remembered the charm, the songs, and the smile. But behind all of that was someone who carried both pride and pain quietly, who worked hard to appear effortless, and who often suffered in silence. And now comes the question that remains after everything has been told: who was Dean Martin, truly, behind all of it?